Hey guys, if you're interested in checking out a video version of the show, please visit the Lowkey Geek channel on YouTube. There you can not only catch the video version of the podcast, but you can also check out my other projects and short form video that I produce. You can find a link in the description. Otherwise, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Low-key geek.
Hey, he's a low-key geek. He tries to be out there when he wants to be, but hey, he's a low-key.
But a low-key geek.
What is going on, everyone? It is Renee here, Low-Key Geek, back with, my first official podcast of 2021. It took only 2.5 months, basically, to get the latest podcast episode, full-length podcast episode up and going here. I've been, doing a lot of stuff on YouTube and uploading clips here and there on the podcast channel. But yeah, it's nice to be back with a full episode here, first one of the year. Hopefully one of many. So I want to thank you guys again for watching and tuning in. As always, this is the podcast where, we talk about all stuff in pop culture, everything in the geekdom universe, whether it be movies, TV, anime, video games, cartoons, what have you. And I put my little spin on things. To those of you who are frequent visitors to the channel know that I do a lot of recaps and stuff. And this episode is definitely going to be not so much of a recap, but more of like a review episode, because this has been a busy week. We haven't had a week like this in a while, where two major things dropped this week, and that is, of course, Zack Snyder's Snyder cut of Justice League, the movie, and the debut of Marvel's Falcon and the Winter Soldier there on Disney Plus. So before I get into any of that stuff, guys, as always, please hit that like and subscribe buttons. If you like what you see, it definitely helps support the channel and keeps the channel growing. I have a goal that I would love to hit in the next month, and that would be to hit 500 subscribers. So it would be great if we could reach that goal and build up this channel and the community there. So for you audio listeners who are listening either on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, what have you, make sure to follow and give a good rating there on iTunes so that we could grow the podcast channel as well. So before I get into all the great geek goodness that is Justice League and Falcon and Winter Soldier there, it's been, for a lot of us, a full year now since we have been enduring this COVID pandemic. And the good thing is, it's, things are looking on the up and up. It looks like, the vaccines are starting to roll out there, and, depending on where you are, places are starting to open up. I know in California recently, movie theaters started reopening again. Here in New York, theaters have reopened in the last couple of weeks. Of course, limited capacity and what have you. So hopefully we are on the right trajectory there to get things back to somewhat normality. I know it's still going to take some time, so let's not, fuck it up for everyone. Let's still make sure that we do our due diligence to be careful and cautious, wear your mask and wash your hands and all that good stuff. But yeah, it's been a full year for myself, not only celebrating, I guess, the year-long quarantining, carefulness and all that stuff like that, but it's also been a full year since I left the corporate world and started to venture out on my own just to see what I can do. And obviously, because of the pandemic, I haven't been able to do a lot of the things I wanted to do. And that was, travel more and, maybe do a lot of things that, required me to be actually outside and interacting with people. But it allowed me a chance to really start up, for example, like this YouTube channel and my online presence and things like that. For the majority of 2020, I was streaming a lot on Twitch, and I took kind of a back seat from there because even though I do enjoy streaming and I love interacting with a lot of the viewers and followers that I've gathered there on Twitch, it was something that I found to be kind of time consuming, and it was taking away a lot of the time away from the things that I really enjoy doing, and that is creating video content. So I ignored YouTube quite a bit. So moving into 2021, one of my focuses was to, get back into video creation, doing more content on YouTube. And, to my surprise and delight, the channel here on YouTube has grown significantly since January, mainly because of this one video I did. You guys may be familiar with it, but I did a kind of recap and review of the infamous Danish cartoon there called John Dillermand, which I believe now is reached 50,000 views. So thank you so much for all of you guys who checked that out. And thank you for all the new subscribers to the channel from there. So, and I've done a lot of things since then, and things that kind of help still grow the channel and all that. So, stay tuned. There's going to be a lot of more stuff coming this year for sure. And like I said, I enjoy doing that stuff. I enjoy putting my spin on recaps and, providing all this type of entertainment for you guys to enjoy. So, hopefully you guys will stick around for the ride, and maybe, you could bring along some of your friends, and let's get the party started here in 2021. That is, if the party hasn't started yet, right? So, again, thank you for everyone who has, subscribed to the channel, and for all of you longtime supporters too since last year. It's made a huge impact in my life, and it means a lot to me, sincerely. So, yeah, thank you for all that you do in showing your support and checking the channel out every week. And yeah, let's keep this ball rolling. So yeah, let's talk about the Snyder Cut, shall we? So leading to Thursday, when the Snyder Cut of Justice League released there on HBO Max, I kind of wanted to step back and review and rewatch the movies that were leading into this, mainly Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, and the original Justice League, right? So I wanted to see like where this journey started, and where it was going to lead us into the release of the Snyder Cut there. And rewatching Man of Steel again, I know it's kind of divisive out there, but I do feel like Man of Steel is one of the better Superman movies that we've gotten in recent years. I may be in the minority when it comes to the Brandon Routh Superman movie, but I also enjoyed that movie just because of the nostalgia factor. It was an homage to the Donner movies, right? And something that I really enjoyed. Obviously, not everything really hit in that movie, but it was a nice attempt there. But with Man of Steel, it provided something a little bit different, where I really felt like you truly got like a year one version of Superman, someone who's still trying to figure things out, someone who's still trying to understand his place in the universe, especially learning who he is and all that. And I know it was a little grim and darker than most of us are used to, but again, you're dealing with somebody who is not familiar with what he's supposed to do and what his station in life is, especially coming to the knowledge that he has acquired a lot of these powers and all that. But I thought it was a really good attempt at that. And if anything, it proved to me that Henry Cavill is an actor who can portray the Superman role really well. Fast forward, then you get into Batman v Superman, and that kind of went the opposite direction. I really didn't think that was a strong movie at all, and I even watched the uncut version, that was released, that had the longer cut of the movie. And even though that cut was a far superior than the theatrical release, still there was a lot of things that I was lacking for me. Like Wonder Woman was kind of thrown in there, and I really didn't feel like she had a huge purpose in the movie, except just to introduce who she was, right, and who she is, and that she's there. I do feel like Ben Affleck's portrayal of Batman was pretty strong. If anything, I love the way Zack Snyder, his movies, how they start. And for the first 20 minutes, you're like locked in. With Man of Steel, you had that great sequence happening on Krypton with Russell Crowe, the father of Kal-El, and just understanding what he had to go through in order to make sure that Kal-El gets shipped off into space there, and the demise of Krypton. I thought it was very powerful and impactful, and it drew you in. And like, all right, this is what I'm getting. Let's go. Let's take it from there. And same thing with Batman v Superman. I thought like the beginning was very strong because you got to see the devastation that was caused from the battle with Zod and Superman, and Bruce, just diving head on, right? Just trying to make sure that his people are okay, and it shows kind of the fortitude that Bruce Wayne, Batman, had, and you knew what kind of character you were dealing with. Now, for the rest of the movie, I felt like Superman kind of took a back seat, and Superman was kind of like portrayed as this whiny little baby, just like, I don't care what people say, I want to do what I want to do, and it's all about you, Lois, and all that stuff like that. And of course, let's not bring up the whole Martha situation there. So and then the forced introduction of Doomsday, which I thought was kind of odd in its own way, but it led to the eventual death of Superman. Spoiler alert, but that was the big to do with that movie and how they were gonna move that forward. So when Justice League finally came out, we were all wondering how they're going to handle this, but not only handle that, but how are they going to handle the formation of the team. And we all know the story already. Zack wasn't able to finish the movie. They brought in Joss Whedon. And my main issues with Justice League, the original, was that it felt like they were trying to force this movie to be an Avengers-like movie. I know, like they were saying before, that the studio really wanted something a little bit more lighthearted, a little bit, something that wasn't so grim and so dark like the previous two movies. And you felt it. You felt like they made a lot of course correction to kind of make it a little bit more Marvel-esque. Yeah, you had a lot of jokes being thrown around amongst all the main characters there, but they tried to also still retain some of the Snyder-like moments. A lot of the slow motions and some moments of grim moments and all that kind of stuff, but it just didn't fit. And I felt like everything was sloppy. A lot of the characters within the team took like a back seat. Like a lot of the storylines weren't fully fleshed out, and it was very important in order to see that, because this was the introduction for the audience of these new characters. I mean, Wonder Woman already got her movie before this, right? So we kind of understood Wonder Woman and all that, but it was our introduction to Aquaman. It was our introduction to The Flash and Cyborg. But it felt like they were just kind of thrown in there, and you had like a group of misfits that were trying to learn how to work together and all that. And not everyone was on the same, beat as everyone else. You know, you had Wonder Woman that was opposing a lot of the decisions that Batman was making, and then you had the Flash, who was like always constantly making jokes and being extremely awkward all throughout the movie and everything like that. And then you had Cyborg, which looked kind of like it was an afterthought, you know. um the main villain of Steppenwolf was very mismanaged, you know, like you didn't really understand what his true intentions were. And then, you know, they tried to make him like this main villain. You know, we didn't know who he was working for, where he really came from. And then the whole explanation of the mother boxes was just poorly, like, you know, portrayed. Like, I feel like for the most part, the audience was confused and had to figure things out either after the movie, or, you know, talk to people who are familiar with the comic books and all that kind of stuff like that. So it wasn't that great of a movie. And again, it felt like a lot of things were kind of stitched together to try to make this Avengers like event. And, you know, at the end, you know, you had your Superman finally showing up, and then, you know, things were used as pawns and try to get him to like join the team and fight Steppenwolf at the end and all that. And the movie kind of just ended. It felt like they ended the movie knowing that they weren't going to do any more of these team ups. You know, at least that's what it felt like. Yeah, they gave us a little Easter egg of like the whole you know, contest between the Flash and Superman as to who could be the fastest and all that, which was like a cute little nod to the comic books and what have you. But it really didn't feel cohesive enough, you know. And then it's no wonder why there's been major delays in the Flash movie. The Cyborg movie that they were talking about was completely taken off the radar. We did eventually get an Aquaman a movie, which was decent. And then we got another Wonder Woman movie, but then that was it. No other Batman movie, no other Superman movie. So it again, you could kind of see how their planning or lack of planning really panned out. And you understand and you know more of that after seeing the Snyder cut of the Justice League. Now, like, let's just get a couple of things out of the way here, and let's talk about, all right, running time. Yeah, it's 4 hours. It's long, but it's streaming, so you have a choice to watch it in parts. I think one of the brilliant things that they did was they divided everything into chapters, right? So you had your part 1s, 2, and 3, and 4, and so on. So it played out like a mini series, which was like really, really well done. And it was cut perfectly so that you can stop after a certain part or chapter and then pick it up, whether it's later in the day or the next day or what have you. It's like reading through a graphic novel, you know, that's divided into chapters. So I thought that was really brilliantly done. And the aspect ratio. Now, I too was confused when I saw it in the, you know, the little 4:3 aspect ratio there. And I didn't understand why he decided to do it that way until I dug up some interviews, and I did some research. And I guess apparently what he was doing is that he is fully in love with the IMAX format. And for those of you who don't know, if you're filming for IMAX, you have to film in that certain aspect ratio, because IMAX screens are not your typical widescreen type of theaters. You know, it's usually more in that 4:3 format, just bigger, right? So you get to see more of you know, the backgrounds and more, you know, framing there. So I kind of understand where he was going with, but it did throw me off in the beginning. But after a while, I got kind of used to it. So it wasn't anything that was a huge deterrent in enjoying the movie. So yeah, so when I started watching it, 10 minutes into it, I can tell, yeah, this feels more like a Zack Snyder movie. You know, it's very epic. It's very, you can tell not only 10 minutes in, but then more so 20 minutes in, that this is Zack Snyder's opus. You know, this is his Lord of the Rings Return of the King movie. I mean, this is the culmination of the trilogy that he was working on, and this was the main payoff. And it felt so well put together and much more fleshed out. It's amazing what simple edits or inclusions of things that they cut can really, what it can really do to a movie. Even the changing of the music in certain aspects. um if you recall in the original Justice League movie, the Paris scene, with the terrorists and they're walking into the building, the type of music that was playing and how things played out felt very hokey, very like campy, very like, it was kind of like a throwback to like an old school superhero serial. It didn't have like that emotional or the gravitas, that type of impact, that this is something huge that's happening, this is something big. Like, you didn't feel that danger that was about to happen in this building until Wonder Woman came in and saved the day, so to speak. But with all those different type of edits, that one scene, which was a little bit longer, and the way that they incorporated Wonder Woman into it, her interactions with everyone afterwards, that nice little touching moment she had with that little girl. By the way, if you know me by now, I can't do reviews without spoiling stuff. So if you haven't seen the movie, stop right here. I won't go on further. Or I will go on further. It's just not for you. Come back to this video and you can watch it again when you're done and you're ready to be spoiled there. But yeah, moving forward, there are potential spoilers because I just can't do reviews without it. But that touching moment she had with the little girl where, the little girl was saying like, when I grow up, can I be like you? And her telling her that she can be anything she wants to be. It gives you that human emotion, that human connection that Wonder Woman had. And that a lot of these new characters that we're getting introduced to, we get to see their human side. We're getting to see more of the personalities. Every character was fully fleshed out and had their own story. So we understood where they're coming from. We understood what their personalities were. The intro to Ezra Miller's Flash. Now, depending on how you feel about Ezra Miller because of his antics off screen, but his Flash was so fully fleshed out that you understand why he's a little awkward and all that. And believe it or not, throughout the rest of the movie, a lot of those weird, awkward, silly moments that he constantly like got himself into was completely cut out. They left some things in there, but he didn't come across as the jokey guy, and all that kind of stuff like that. He had intelligence. He had moments where he was contributing to the team and all that, and the way it was just all fleshed out from his intro really helped you understand his motivation and all that. They did the same thing with Aquaman. He was able to visit Atlantis and he had interactions with people there. We saw William Dafoe, his character, show up for the first time in this universe before the Aquaman movie, and understanding where Arthur is coming from and why he's hesitant in helping people out and all that stuff like that. And Cyborg in the original Justice League was this brooding guy who's like, I don't understand why I have all these things and I can't understand it all, and I'm learning these things and I don't know what to do with it and all that kind of stuff. But in this movie, the way that it's been cut and the way that Zack Snyder was telling his story was that he had this relationship with his father and his mom, and he wanted his father to be a presence and all that stuff like that. And then when he got into his car accident, which we finally got to see, he loses his mom, and he's left with like this huge deformities and all that, and his dad brings him back to life. Only because his dad feels like he's still destined for greatness, right? He still can accomplish all these many things. And it's his dad that's helping him, walking him through his new, gifts that he has. And it's Cyborg who's taking that advice and learning things on his own and all that. And it's no longer the brooding Cyborg. It's more like, I want to understand more of what I can do and how I can help. And then you could see he's still trying to rekindle that relationship with his dad. And there's a moment in the movie where his dad dies, and we see it, and he sees it happen right before his eyes, and he wants to honor that, learn everything that his dad was trying to teach him to better help the world and the team and all that. It was, you could really tell, like, throughout this movie, Cyborg was one of the major characters in this movie, and we never even thought that, and we never got that from the original. So it was really, like I mentioned before, it wasn't the gang of misfits that were trying so hard to learn to work together. The team came together, and they all genuinely wanted to understand what they can do to help with this new menace that's invaded Earth, right? um they all have their own contributions. They all are trying to work together. There's no more of that hesitation or the disagreements, like, I don't understand why we're doing all that. It's more like there's nothing left for us to do but this. It makes sense for us to try to do this. This is how we can try to do it. I will take care of that, you'll take care of this, and all that kind of stuff like that. Everyone had their own share and input, and it really felt like a team dynamic, which we didn't get in the original. We felt like everyone was forced to work together, just because. And now we get the sense that everyone's working together because there's a need for them to, there's a need for them to come together and work towards the main goal and getting rid of Steppenwolf and figure out what's going on. And let's talk about Steppenwolf. This is, now we finally get to see who he is and why he's doing what he's doing, because he really did feel like a minion. He felt like a herald. If I were to use, like, the Silver Surfer Galactus term, he really felt like a herald of Darkseid. And we got to understand what his motivations were as to why he's on Earth trying to acquire all the mother boxes there. Darkseid is a huge presence in this entire movie. We get to see that everything that Steppenwolf is doing is for the one sole purpose of getting Darkseid what he wants and getting Darkseid to invade eventually, right? And we get a lot of that storyline there, fully fleshed out. Again, we didn't get so much of this detail in the original movie, so it's amazing how much we're getting here. And he looks better. He just simply looks better, and you feel that he is a menacing presence and not like this hokey, one-dimensional villain. And everyone else didn't feel one-dimensional either. Aquaman, even though he is like the surfer dude, it wasn't all about him and these surfer dude one-liners and all that stuff like that. They kept some of those in there, but it didn't feel like it was just for the sake of laughs or chuckles or all that stuff like that. You knew that this is just his personality. This is just how he is and how he conducts himself. But like I said, like, everyone was fully fleshed out. We got a little bit of surprises here too, just like you really felt like a lot of the movie and all the events that were transpiring in the movie was all in a direct result of Superman passing. And that's how the events really started rolling on, and why the invasion started happening, or the plans for started happening. You got to see more of the impact that this world and universe was having because of the death of Superman. You got to see more of the grieving, because of it. Lois's character, Superman's, Clark's mom, even Batman and Wonder Woman and the rest of the cast of characters there. You got to see how much of an impact Superman had on their lives, and they all realized that it is truly important to have someone like him to help out when these kinds of things happen. So it's like I said, it's amazing how these simple edits and inclusions of things that were completely cut out, how things were retooled and rewired to tell such a different story. It's night and day compared to the original Justice League. It really is. Now, I don't personally think they could have released this 4 hour long movie in the theater when that time was. Maybe there could have been a shorter cut of it. It's hard to say because after watching it in its full glory, I don't know how you would change it. I really don't. Because I felt like everything that was that everything that transpired through this movie, the way the setup was, the way the team came together, the menacing aspect of Steppenwolf, his motivations, why he's doing what he's doing, Darkseid, understanding that Darkseid is the Thanos of this universe. We got that here, and we didn't see any of that in the original. So it's amazing. It just makes you wonder like what they were thinking there. But it's just like I said, night and day. We got to see our first look at Martian Manhunter, and how he was there the whole time and kind of observing, taking, just observing how these heroes will band together for the cause and how they would team up and all that. And then, that conversation that he has with Bruce at the end of the movie, understanding that this team is going to need to stay together and he wants to help out. And, you can tell Snyder kind of had like a foresight or a plan for more of these movies to happen, to kind of build on this team dynamic and maybe even add more to it, right? But we would have gotten, I think, the Justice League that we would have been expecting to get, just like what we may have seen in the animated series that was well received, and I loved it personally. Things that we may have seen in the comic books and all that. It was just an amazing feat that he was able to do. And I personally think this is one of Zack Snyder's best movies. And I would even say like this is probably, in my opinion, as of today, the best DC movie we've gotten to date. And I don't know where it's going to go from here. It would be amazing to see if they could convince him to continue this type of storyline within this universe. I know we're getting the Matt Reeves Batman, which is like a younger take on Batman. I know they're working on the Flash movie, and I don't know if that's going to take place after this or before this. It's hard to say. Who knows what's going to happen with Ezra Miller, if he's going to continue with that. But after watching this movie, I am more invested and more interested in seeing these individual movie spin-offs, like Cyborg. Again, how much of a fleshed out character he was in this movie, and his realizations that he had throughout the movie and at the end. I would love to see a standalone Cyborg movie now. The Flash, you know after watching Justice League, I was like, you know what? The Flash is kind of cool. He's quirky and all that. He's not the same Flash that I watched in the first 2 seasons of the CW series, which I really enjoyed a lot. But there could be something there. Now, after watching his storyline and how his character played out, and he had a huge part at the end of this movie, you really felt for him. You really understood again why he's doing what he's doing, how he wants to contribute, his meaning in this universe and in this team. I am now fully 100% invested in a Flash movie. I want to see his storyline continue, whether it's with Ezra Miller or not. If it's the same character that we got to see in this movie, I want to see more of it because he is a fascinating character, and I can only see more fascinating stuff coming from his storyline and what have you. And let's talk about, and probably one of the more talked about scenes or sequences in this movie is the new nightmare sequence, that we got at the end. I love how in the movie they tied, that whole vision that Bruce had in Batman v Superman, where the future Flash kind of came out and kind of told him about Lois, and it's all about Lois and all that kind of stuff like that. And he really calls it out in one of the moments within this movie where saying, I had a vision about him, telling me stuff in the past, and there may be something more to that, because they do understand that Lois is the bond to keep Superman sane. It's like that love that they share. It's what Superman sees as humanity's compassion, right? And a kind of, just like how his dad was that role for him, Lois is now the next level for that for him. And the minute she's gone, he loses it, right? He loses it all. And that nightmare sequence that they had there gives you that kind of glimpse as to what will happen if Lois is gone again, and it's Bruce's fault, right? And you could tell this is like way into the future and what have you. He's teamed up with, you know, Deathstroke, and the Joker's there, and the Flash in like an older Flash, and Mara from Aquaman and what have you. So it's not the team that you're used to, but it's a team that he has to find himself in. But the dialogue that he had with the Joker, the back and forth that they had about loss and grieving, and not understanding that, or maybe he does understand that, but he chooses not to pay too much attention and focus on it. This is why the big threat now that they're facing is an angry Superman who's against them because of what happened to Lois. We don't know what happened to Lois, but it looks like it's something that Bruce did, or he couldn't prevent, or what have you. But that dialogue that him and the Joker had, and of course the Joker's played by Jared Leto, is one of the best interactions that we've had between the Joker and Batman since Heath Ledger and Christian Bale. It really puts into a lot of perspective about the character of Batman and Bruce Wayne, how he could never really truly kill anybody, but he suffered so much loss in his life. So it's hard for him to kind of relate, because he tends to put it in the back of his mind, or he broods off of it to make him the vigilante that he is, and all that. And trying to understand why Superman's doing what he's doing and what have you. It was just very, very amazing to watch. And again, it would have been really interesting to see what Zack would have done to carry that on, or carry that forward. And he still could. We don't know. This might convince him to want to do more of these. Who's to say? But again, it was just very fascinating to see this all play out. And it's Mara, by the way, Mara from Aquaman. I think I said Mara. So my bad on that. But yeah, and we didn't have to deal with a lot of the nonsensical things that we got in Justice League, like the Russian like family, or the Eastern European family that was there for no particular reason. Like, that was all cut out, and we understand why Steppenwolf chose that location. And it, again, everything was just fully explained. It gave a lot to the audience, because it's understanding that the audience is probably not in tune with the comic books and the lore and all that kind of stuff like that, because they didn't have enough time to build that up. Not like the Marvel Universe. The Marvel Universe had tons of movies to lead up to an Avengers event, and then again, a ton of movies to lead up to the next Avengers event, like they didn't have that here. So they needed to give a lot more to the audience, like, for example, like when Wonder Woman was explaining to Batman about the dawn of men, and going back as to how the mother boxes came into the world and into the universe, and their first battle with Darkseid during that time, and how the Atlanteans and the Amazons had to team up. And the first time they teamed up, then they got the gods to team up with them, the Green Lantern Corps and all that kind of stuff like that. That was explained in a much more better way, that we really understood what the significant impact is about these mother boxes, and how they really needed to prevent them, to gather them all up together and combine them, so that the it would prevent them from taking over the world and pretty much destroying it, right? For Darkseid to fully habitate it and all that. Um, and lastly, the way they treated Superman. One of the things that really took me out of the original Justice League was the beginning. When you saw Superman show up on that little iPhone video that the kids were taking there, the little podcast, and the CGing off of the mustache, it was so blatant. You could see it. And that really put a bad taste in my mouth from the beginning of the movie, that throughout the whole movie, I was just constantly looking at Superman's face. And it always felt off to me. Them not including this and the way they were treating Superman and how they brought him back. And instead of him being like this zombie that he had no idea of, like, why he's there and all that kind of stuff like that, there were still moments of that, but we understood why. It's like, this is like a soul that is not fully, back yet. He's trying to figure out what happened to him. Who are these people he's never seen before? Getting back his soul after being dead for a while. And then the interactions with Lois. Lois wasn't used as the key here, as this is plan B or whatever have you. She just happened to be there naturally and see all this happen and talk Superman down from his what looked like path of destruction, especially with the team members there. And then on his own, he was getting his memories back and his soul was coming back. And he understood that he was brought back for a reason. They must have done this for a reason. And I need to figure that out. I need to find out what I can do to help, instead of, I'm back. There's this problem. Guess I gotta go, because I'm the only one that can help out here. It's more, again, part of being a team. It's a team up, and all that. And they left him in the black outfit, in the black suit. It was interesting to see that was the suit of choice, and it carried on through the rest of the movie. We never saw him in the typical red and blue. He was just, even at the end, when everything was going back to normal, everyone's living their own lives and all that, and he's going off into the alley and he rips off his shirt. It's still the black and silver suit. So it was really interesting. And for me, that just tells me that this is a different Superman. This is a Superman that is now evolved into something different. He's a little bit more aware now. This is his second chance at life, as he said it. This is my second chance, and he's not going to mess it up. And I feel like we got a new type of Superman. And when he showed up and he was joining with the team in stopping Steppenwolf, it wasn't more like, hey, you guys are having problems here and all that kind of stuff like that. It was just more like, boom, I'm here. What can I do? All right, let me help out. So yeah, it's like I said, it's just amazing how different everything was, and I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I do feel like this is one of Zack's best movies. I put it up there with 300 and Watchmen. I in my opinion, this is just my personal take on it. I think it's one of his best movies, his opus, as I like to say. And it's one of the better DC movies, if not the best DC movie that we have available right now. So yeah, if you haven't seen it yet, obviously, if you watch through all this, I've maybe spoiled some stuff for you or what have you, but I highly recommend this. I'm going to watch it again. I didn't feel that way when I watched the original Justice League. When I watched Justice League again this week, that was only the second time since I saw it in the theater, originally back in 2018. I had no desire to want to watch that movie again because it was just so shallow and empty and too formulaic and too hokey. I guess that's the best way I could describe it. It was just really, really hokey. But now, this is just a full-fledged, it felt like an epic superhero comic book movie, and it made me interested in these DC characters that I didn't feel like I was so interested and attached to them before. And it makes me wish I can see this storyline continue. I don't know if we're going to get that. It's going to be very unfortunate if we don't. But it is what it is, you know. So yeah. So I know normally in my reviews I like to give ratings and what have you. So if I was to give a rating here for this, I would definitely give it a 4 out of, you know what? Let's go 4.5 out of 5 Superman symbols, logos. Yeah, let's do that. Let's have some fun with that. 4.5 out of 5. I know it's a high rating. It's high, but that's just how I feel now. I could feel differently in a year from now, but again, I just thought this was fantastic. And I don't know if a lot of people are going to give Zack Snyder the credit here, but it was nice to see him really be able to release the version of the movie that at least he says that he wanted. I know he did some reshoots and new filming for all that, which, by the way, I couldn't really figure out what was new or what wasn't. A lot of it did feel like there was a lot of new scenes that was cut out, that was just reintroduced into this movie. Yeah, and don't get me wrong, there are a lot of scenes from the original that was introduced here. It was just spliced differently to give a different tone overall. But it was hard for me to determine what was new. I think the Martian Manhunter interaction with Bruce Wayne was new at the end there. I feel like that was probably one of the new things that they filmed. But yeah, it was a fantastic movie, and it's one I'm definitely going to want to watch again for sure. And like I said, probably one of the better DC movies that you'll ever get to watch. So yeah, so that's my take. I'm curious to hear what you guys think. So definitely in the comments, leave your thoughts about the movie. Was this something that you were expecting? Were you blown away by it? Do you now want to see what Snyder could do moving forward if he's given the chance to, right? I know he said like he's probably not moving forward with any more things within this universe, but you never know. We never thought we're going to get a Snyder cut, and then fast forward, look, we finally got it, right? So yeah, so it is what it is. So the other thing, obviously, I wanted to talk about, and the big thing from this week, is we got the debut of Falcon and the Winter Soldier series on Disney Plus, and I believe it's going to be 6 episodes this series, and each probably going to be like an hour or just under an hour long. So I was able to watch the first episode there, and I'm going to say the same thing that I said when I watched WandaVision. Without this series, or them putting these characters in this type of series, we would never have gotten a chance to understand what the characters are like, because, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, even though they had their moments in the Marvel movies and all that, we never really got a full storyline or deep dive into how they're like when they're not superheroes, or what their personalities are more like when they're not teamed up with Captain America and the rest of the Avengers there, or whatever, or Tony Stark, or anything like that. The great opportunity that we have, and the same thing goes for Wanda and Vision too. The great opportunity that we have now with these type of series is to understand the characters more, give us more of an attachment to these characters. And this is a parallel to the new Justice League, because we got an attachment to these characters because we understood them more. We got more of a story. In this one episode, I feel more attached to Falcon and Bucky there, more so than I ever did in any of the movies that I saw them in. We got to see how it's like for them to get back to their own lives after the events of Endgame. You have Bucky, who's now in the real world trying to deal with his PTSD of everything that he did when he was with Hydra. He's seeing a therapist. He's seeing, he's taking care or hanging out with an old guy. And then he tries to go on a date. Um, and then we find out why he's hanging out with this old guy, because he's trying to make amends for something that he caused this old guy, whether the guy knows it or not. And then you have, Falcon there, going back to his family, learning that his family is not in the best shape. And he's trying to do what he can do to help the family, financially and with their businesses and all that. So it's very interesting to see how those events and being a superhero, and then when you're not in that role, how they live their lives outside of that, you know. And it's really, really interesting to see how that was really fleshed out. And it was really, really great. I mean, they haven't even teamed up yet. They're just living their individual lives and trying to live their lives and deal with either family or themselves in a way, to get back to some sort of normalcy there. Falcon gives up the shield, which was something that I wasn't expecting to see so soon. He basically said, like, and again, this leads off right from the ending of Endgame there, and it sounds like it's 2 months after that. He gives up the shield. He has his press conference and he says, like, look, this shield belongs to someone else and it's not me. He gives it up to the Smithsonian or the government or what have you. He has this interesting interaction with War Machine there, Don Cheadle, who was also surprised that he gave up on not taking on that mantle there. And he just feels like he wants to be his own individual person and do what he can, that's not tied to Captain America, right? We saw the beginning of the episode was fantastic because we could see that he's still involved with the government in helping things out. He has kind of like a new partner, what it looks like, a young army kid or a Marine, and they're trying to do what they have to do out there with their duties. The great action sequences. Oh my God, it was the first 10 minutes of this episode was just nonstop action, and it was thrilling and amazing to see. So we got to see what he's doing with himself there. And then the way the episode ended, it was just so heartbreaking, and again, like I mentioned multiple times in the past and before, beware of spoilers when it comes to what I talk about stuff, but we get to see the government decided to call on a new Captain America or put that mantle on someone else. And Falcon is watching this on TV as they were having a press conference, and you can see the regret. It's like, why didn't I take it on? Like, that could have been me. I thought I was doing something good, and they went ahead and they decided to just, nope, the world needs a Captain America and we're going to assign it to somebody. And then boom, we had to introduce with this new Captain America. We don't know who this guy is yet. The episode kind of ends that way. But when you look at the credits rolling, I believe we saw like a poster of the new Captain America, and his name is John Walker. And if you're familiar with the comic books, and I'm not 100% familiar with the books and all that, but I did some research after the episode. John Walker is the guy who becomes U.S. agent, or super patriot. He went through multiple monikers, even the moniker of Captain America. But it looks like this is what we're getting here, and I don't know how that's going to play out for the rest of the series, but it's going to be really interesting to see what's going to happen there and the dynamic as to how Falcon will take it, and how are they going to get Falcon and Bucky, Winter Soldier, to team up together. Like, what is that one driving force that, forces them to have to team up. It's interesting because you see that Sam is constantly trying to call Bucky, but Bucky's not answering his call. His therapist calls him out on that, because Bucky's a loner. He doesn't know how to interact with people. He doesn't know how to make friends or what have you. So this is where and we already know like they don't get along well. I mean, we've seen that in the movie. So we are going to get that buddy cop series. So it's going to be interesting how that plays out. What's also going to be very interesting is that coming off of WandaVision, which was a very more fantastical, universe that dealt a lot with magic and sorcery and mystic arts and all that kind of stuff like that. This is definitely going to be a more grounded series, so it's going to be interesting to see how people are going to take that coming off of WandaVision, and what's the expectation there, because this was also originally supposed to come out before WandaVision. So I could kind of see how this would be kind of like an easier in to the next events of this phase of the MCU. A more grounded take on things. Than we were supposed to get Black Widow, and then boom, right into the magic and the fantastical stuff in WandaVision and all that. So it will be very interesting to see how the audience will take it. But personally, I think the first episode was great. I really, really enjoyed it. And it's a nice setup to see how the rest of the series is going to play out, and how Sam and Bucky there, Falcon and the Winter Soldier are going to team up and what they're going to have to do, and how this new Captain America is going to play out as well. So great setup. Looking forward to see how that's going to play out and how the series is going to be like. Will this be the water cooler talk every week like WandaVision was? I don't know. Again, it all depends on how the audience is going to take to it, but it will be interesting to see nonetheless there. So that's my take on episode 1 there of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Let me take a sip of my coffee. By the way, happy first day of spring. If you're on the East Coast, and especially in New York like I am, sure doesn't feel it. We were getting a lot of snow last night, and rain, and it's been really cold this weekend. It's cold again today. So hopefully it looks like we're going to get some semblance of spring starting next week. So it's nice to get the warmer weather out with things going the way that they're going on here. It would be nice to be able to enjoy more moments outside instead of being all cramped up indoors like we have been. So so again, those are my 2 reviews there. And now lastly, only because I haven't had a chance to do my final thoughts on WandaVision, I figured let's talk about WandaVision and let's talk about the series as a whole and how everything played out. A couple weekends ago, they debuted the behind the scenes. I believe they called it, what did they call it? Assembled, I think it was. Marvel Studios. I think it was called Assembled because they're assembling the universe, and it looks like this is going to be the docu-series that they're probably going to do for every Marvel series that they're doing. And obviously because WandaVision just ended, they did their episode of the behind the scenes there of WandaVision. And I thought it was a really, really nice capper to the series because you got to understand what went into making this series. Because one of the things that I thought was fascinating about the series was being able not to only portray the sitcom eras, which in and of itself is not that easy to do, but to still maintain a separate storyline that's based off of reality. So you had the Wanda reality, which is the sitcom eras, and her dealing with her grief and all that. And then you had the reality of that, what's happening outside of that, and how that reality was trying to, intertwine or invade hers. And being able to maintain those storylines or that different sets of realities is not easy. And I was really, really fascinated as how they were able to do that throughout the series. The greatest thing that came out of this documentary for me was learning that Matt Shackman, the director of the series, was a child actor in the sitcom eras himself. They revealed that he was on a lot of the 80s sitcoms. I think he was on Different Strokes, Growing Pains, or what have you. So you had a director that knew and understood how the sitcom eras worked, because he was in it. And you feel it, because every episode that was taking place in a certain era, sitcom era, you felt like it was that era for sure, 100%. Whether it was 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Like the 80s was great because that was my era. And then I understood the 90s too because I watched a lot of that, with the Malcolm in the Middles and what have you. So it was really, really great to see that, and the care that they put into making those episodes. You learn by watching this documentary that they actually had a real live studio audience for the 50s sitcom. So they had the real laughters for the sitcom and all that. So I thought that in itself was just fascinating, the amount of detail and care that they put into that. And then the music, for the theme songs and how they carefully curated these theme songs to not only mimic the theme songs of the sitcoms that they were, copying off of, whether it was, the Dick Van Dyke Show or Bewitched. They spoke about the Family Ties mashup with Growing Pains and all that. The Brady Bunch with hints of Partridge Family in the 70s, and obviously the Malcolm in the Middle inspiration there. And one of the things I love is getting validation for things that I guessed, and every time the sitcoms came up, without diving into it or looking at what everyone else was saying, I said like, oh, this is that. Oh my God, this is Bewitched. Oh, Agatha Comes Along. It's so much like the Munsters, the Family Ties and Growing Pains mashup with a little hint of what is that, the Olsen show, the family, what is it? Oh my God, I am so blanking right now. um Olsen twins sitcom. you know it's really amazing how sometimes Full House. God, how could I forget Full House? um because the reason why I thought it was Full House is because they did that pan above the family in the park, and that reminded me of that park in San Francisco as it was panning out. um Validation, they even said it and mentioned it, especially since Elizabeth Olsen kind of grew up on that set watching her sisters doing that TV show. So and how every theme song had the same beats but done differently, to mimic that era of sitcom. But how anytime the WandaVision was mentioned, that it always had that same beats to go with it. Very smart, very, very intelligent way of doing things. But yeah, like I said, the documentary was a great capper, but the series as a whole, the last episode was great. Look, I know us as geeks and as fans, we all had our fan theories. We all had our wish list of things that they did. I am more than happy to admit that. I was hoping that we were going to get a major reveal at this last episode, another cameo or what have you. More questions. I mean, more answers to questions that we had. But we got what we got, and I was happy for it. The battle with the two visions was really well done. The use of logic and how, they kind of like stopped them from fighting, and how Vision was trying to explain to him, that you're programmed to take on the Vision, but I'm not really the Vision. I'm like a construct. And that whole, rewiring the way he was thinking of his programming and all that kind of stuff like that. You know, the confrontation with Wanda and Agatha, you know, and you know, but however, I will say, missed opportunity with Quicksilver. I mean, Richard Boner. I mean, really? Um, and I wonder if they chose Boner because that was also the character name from Growing Pains. But it was just, that was very unfortunate. You know, I felt like that was a huge cock tease in a way. But it would have been nice if they found a way to tie it in, you know, to tie in Quicksilver into this new universe, whether it was the X-Men Quicksilver there. But I do feel like that was a letdown. You know, everyone had their final moments, you know, like Darcy had her final moment. We got to see Monica's final moment. You know, it was great to see the family team up, kind of like a Incredibles, Fantastic Four team up there, you know, and all that. Um, you know, another thing that I also didn't appreciate was how they downplayed, you know, the villains in this series. You know, Agatha was done pretty well, and how she remains in the town, like in her own kind of like prison, so to speak. But we know that, or we hope, and it looks like Wanda is going to be more than likely talking to her again as Wanda is learning her newfound chaos magic powers and understanding what that all means to her and all that. But the way they handled Hayward, I thought that was very, very unfortunate. And they kind of made him, again, the one bad thing that Marvel tends to do is that they make their villains very one-dimensional, you know, and it happened. There was such buildup that I was truly hoping that Hayward was going to be more than what we've seen, you know, or more than what it appears. But he just became like this typical bad guy, you know, who was just up to no good, or he believed in what he was doing was good, but it really wasn't, you know, and it kind of like, you know, I would say they kind of like wussed out on that big time. But you know, in Darcy had her little cameo at the end, and then that was it. She vamoosed. Another thing I kind of wish they did was, you know, when Wanda was confronting the town and all the citizens there, especially at the end as she was doing her little walk of shame, it would have been nice if they addressed that more, because she caused this entire town a lot of grief, and a lot of you know, she was mind controlling all of them, and the amount of pain that they all went through. That's not something I feel like she should get away with, but I think that's going to play more into her psyche as we see her progress moving forward. You know, obviously we see her doing the Thanos thing, you know, retiring in a cabin somewhere remote, as she was living her life, and then her astral self was learning the ways of chaos magic and learning how to be the Scarlet Witch there. So I thought that was really interesting. You know, the voices we hear at the end of the kids, I don't know if that's real or if that's just like a throwback or something within her mind that's bringing things up. I don't know, multi-dimension, what have you. I think the kids are gone, and I wish they would just leave it that way, because again, it's a lesson of grief and losing things that you love, right? The whole series is a great story about loss and depression, mental state and mental health, and learning how to deal with grief and how to carry on and moving forward. It was a series that dealt with that so well through us seeing what Wanda was going through and the pain she was causing other people, the things that she thought was doing right and how it wasn't, you know, learning how to deal with all that depression and grief. You know, she didn't have it easy. You know, she saw her parents die, she saw her brother die, she saw Vision die twice, now three times, you know, in this series. It's so much to for one person to have to go through, especially with her emotions and all that. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this is going to play into her psyche moving forward. especially once she has to deal more with the effects of being the Scarlet Witch and learning her chaos magic and what that means to her and all that. And then, we all know she's going to be in Doctor Strange, and how that's going to, how they are going to interact, or what's the purpose of her being alongside Doctor Strange there, or is Doctor Strange going to be going against her? Who knows? I don't know. But overall, I thought the series was very well done. And it was very enjoyable. And, even though we all had our theories and, we all had our checklist and all that, and most of it wasn't true and didn't come into fruition and all that, it was still fun. It was still fun to speculate. This is what you would do if you're reading every issue of a comic book, right? As they were coming out. And you'd be like, oh, what if this happened? Or what if that happened? Or, oh, God, I can't wait to find out what the big reveal is in the next issue. Or even like we were watching TV back in the day, with Lost and Breaking Bad. It was nice to have a lot of that speculation because it's just fun. This is what we do. We did it with The Mandalorian, like all the speculation with The Mandalorian, especially season 2 of The Mandalorian, and all that. It's just fun because it gets us talking. It gets us, having conversations about things that we enjoy and things that we love, especially in this geekdom that we're all a part of. Some of us do take it a little bit more seriously than others, but still, and there are a lot of people who make fun of us for it, and all that. And that's fine. A lot of it is definitely warranted, but there's that fun factor of being able to speculate, because it just means that we're so invested in what we're watching or what we're into, that we have those passions come out. So yeah, overall, again, great series. And that's why I also said before, when I was talking about Falcon and the Winter Soldier, it's going to be very interesting to see how people are going to take to this Falcon and the Winter Soldier series, because it's definitely different from WandaVision. And knowing that we were supposed to get WandaVision after the fact, after Falcon and Winter Soldier, it's going to be interesting to see, like, are we going to be able to come down from that high that we got from WandaVision, watching it week to week with all the fantastical stuff happening, all the major speculations of multiverses and inclusions and who's involved and all that kind of stuff like that. Are we going to get the same thing from this new series? So it's going to be very interesting to see how people are going to react, and what kind of Easter eggs are going to be thrown at us, and what kind of speculations are going to be able to be formed by watching this series. I mean, already the first episode gave us certain forms of speculation, especially with the reveal at the end of it, right? So it's going to be fun, and it's going to be a very busy couple of months, because I believe after this, we are going to get, I think Black Widow is supposed to hit afterwards, and then we're going to get the Loki series, which again will deal with different realities and time dimensions and multiverses and all that stuff like that. So it's like going through a roller coaster, right? It's like now we're a little bit more grounded, and then we're going to get right back up again, so it'll be interesting to see. And then leading into, I think, Shang-Chi and the Eternals and what have you. I don't have the full slate in front of me, so I don't know what the timeline is like, but there's going to be a lot of interesting stuff here for the Marvel Universe. And I'm definitely along for the ride to see where things are going to lead up, because it's fun. It's been very, very interesting and fun to watch everything and intake a lot of content. But yeah, this week was busy. I mean, Thursday through Friday, let's just say I didn't have a lot of sleep, because I was intaking a lot of this content there, but it was fun. Again, as always, I'm interested to hear about your thoughts about Falcon and the Winter Soldier. WandaVision. I mean, I feel like most of us have already carried on to WandaVision. I know some people are actually watching WandaVision for the first time now, or are finishing it up right now. So it'll be interesting to see what their thoughts are. But yeah, I think that's going to be the episode for today. So a lot of things to talk about because of all the stuff that's dropped, but more to talk about in weeks to come, especially with all the news that's starting to come out about movies, you know, especially once now that movie theaters are starting to open up. The theaters are gearing up for what hopefully will be the summer blockbuster season, if there is such one anymore. But I believe the big release coming soon is King Kong versus Godzilla. So if you're into big kaiju monster battles, that's something to look forward to on HBO Max there and in theaters, I believe. But yeah, that's the episode, guys. So thank you again for watching. Thank you again for tuning in. If you have any questions, thoughts, comments, feedback, please don't forget to leave them in the comment section. I respond to them pretty much all, you know, believe it or not. Again, if you're not new to the channel, you know, I love to chime in on people's, you know, feedback and questions and what have you. Again, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe buttons. For you audio listeners, don't forget to follow and leave a great rating there. But I will catch all of you guys next time. So let's
Low-key
play the
geek.
outro music.
Hey,
Guys, thank you
low-key
again. And as always,
be
stay
out
cool,
there
stay
when he
classy,
wants to
stay
be,
safe,
but hey,
be kind to one
low-key,
another. And I hope you guys
low-key.
enjoy your weekend. Until next time, peace.